video is brought to you by Magic Spoon. What's up, everybody? Helen here to talk about the prettiest, strangest people on Earth. Actors. And I don't know if you know this, but sometimes actors do super wild things for their craft. Sometimes it's learning to ice skate. Sometimes it's sewing 1,000-year-old Egyptian artifacts into their costumes. But sometimes, if they're a student of method acting, it's dropping a dead pig in a mailbox. Well, that's what it includes if you're Jared Leto. Leto was once a critical and commercial darling, earning acclaim for his performances in Requiem for a Dream and Dallas Buyers Club. But in recent years, his public persona has felt less wedded to his acting and more to the antics surrounding his increasingly abysmal performances.
Nobody has ever said that to me, nobody.
Most recently in the two-time box office flop, Morbius. So how did Leto lose his way? And is his use, or misuse, of method acting techniques bringing Hollywood down with him? Let's find out in this Wisecrack Edition, Method Acting. What went wrong? But before we get into it, I'm gonna take a break to have some Magic Spoon cereal. Magic Spoon puts all the fun flavors of your childhood favorites into sophisticated cereals that are good for you too. They're keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and low-carb. Plus there are 0 grams of sugar, about 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each 140-calorie serving. My personal favorite Magic Spoon flavor is cookies and cream, but you can also try a bunch of other flavors, like cocoa, fruity, cinnamon roll, peanut butter, frosted, blueberry muffin, and maple waffle. Plus, fan favorite flavor Honey Nut has joined the permanent collection too. Also, quick note, Honey Nut does contain 1 gram of sugar per serving. If you're ready to try it for yourself, click the link below to order Magic Spoon cereal today. You can build a custom variety box, and if you use the code Wisecrack, you can get $5 off. And with Magic Spoon's 100% happiness guarantee, there's no reason to not give it a try today. Go ahead and click the link below to get $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/wisecrack to save $5 on your order today. Oh, and great news for our viewers in Canada and the UK. Magic Spoon now ships to you too. Now, back to the show. If you're a movie buff, you've probably heard about Leto's preferred style of acting, known as the method. And it's worth examining what method acting actually is. Today, the term is basically synonymous with an actor immersing themselves so deeply in their character that all distinction functionally disappears. Like Daniel Day-Lewis refusing to shower while filming The Crucible, or Christian Bale basically starving himself for The Machinist, or Adrian Brody nuking his entire personal life for The Pianist. But while this style of acting gets a lot of publicity, it has very little to do with method acting as it was initially conceived. The term the method was created by Russian acting teacher and scholar Konstantin Stanislavski, who believed in переживание, or living apart. He thought actors should depict life in all its raw truth. To that end, he argued that they should incorporate their own lived experiences into their performances via emotional memory. That is, all the sensations, emotions, and physical experiences you had acquired over the course of your life, which you could turn on to bring greater truth to a scene. He required his students to use the full extent of their physicality and psychology, and encouraged them to think deeply about their character's motivation in any given scene. Every movement you made should serve that motivation, and if channeled correctly, he believed this could create a truly transcendent performance, one in which the audience might very well forget they're watching a performance at all. Method acting would later be adopted by American acting instructors like Lee Strasberg and Stella Adler, though they disagree on its meaning. Strasberg emphasized psychology and tapping into effective memory via techniques like improvisation. Adler, in contrast, evolved the craft from primarily relying on personal lived experiences to prioritizing extensive research and using imagination to immerse the actor in the given circumstances of a role. This was in contrast to what was going on in Hollywood, where silent film stars had learned to compensate for their silence through exaggerated motions and facial expressions. Dramatic actors behaved more like dancers, while comedians like Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton pulled from traditions like vaudeville to create visual comedy that didn't need sound to be funny. By the time talkies rolled around in the late 1920s, film performance had been solidified in its abstractness, and realism wasn't even desirable. What's more, Hollywood had consolidated its dominance over national cinema, and its burgeoning studio system had established tight control over every creative choice that went into filmmaking, including acting techniques. If naturalism in silent film was functionally impossible, once they turned the mics on, it was considered downright unprofessional. Acting natural for the camera didn't strike anybody as particularly impressive, so actors turned it on, the most successful ones patenting a particular character to establish their star power. Think Humphrey Bogart's world weariness, or Katharine Hepburn's airy quips and icy stares. Through typecasting, actors were differentiated as products. For example, when Jimmy Stewart repeated the same sweet-natured optimist performance, he was reliably delivering a product as only he could. Hollywood rumbled along like this for a couple decades, and Americans seemed cool with it. That is, until A Streetcar Named Desire hit theaters. You can't overstate the impact of Marlon Brando, whose performance style ushered in many of the greats, from James Dean to Sidney Poitier and Meryl Streep. The reason for Brando's sudden acclaim is simple. He was one of the first Americans to use the method. While Cary Grant was preoccupied with acting like, well, Cary Grant, Brando was preoccupied with capturing the unique essence of each character, both internally and externally.
You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody.
Brando's acting was certainly in a league of its own, but of course in this league, there was crying in baseball.
Hey, Stella!
But he was also the right man at the right time. Just as he was emerging, Hollywood was undergoing a mid-century shift in the kinds of male characters it put on screen. This meant moving away from suave actors trading on their star power and towards characters who were rugged, angry, miserable, cruel, and antisocial to the bone. It's no surprise that some scholars attribute this trend to a need to express the collective pain and trauma American men had experienced over the course of 2 world wars. Brando was the perfect avatar for the very real collective suffering Americans had endured. But method acting wasn't just about capturing the zeitgeist. In addition to facilitating more naturalistic performances, it also gave actors a greater degree of authorship over the work. When creating his own backstories, internal monologues, and emotional experiences, an actor like Brando was significantly adding to, and sometimes even changing the script. Brando would even rewrite now iconic lines to make them feel more natural.
Instead, you come into my house on the day my daughter's to be married and you ask me to do murder. Money.
Note the way he gently cradles the cat as he plans a brutal hit. And that cat wasn't even in the script. This mother. But some actors inspired by Brando's method acting struggled with turning their character on and off at whim. And in the 1980s, Robert De Niro found a solution with his breakthrough Oscar-winning performance in Raging Bull, in which he played a troubled former boxer.
What you hit me in the face?
For the role, he gained 60 pounds and did in-depth research about the Italian immigrant experience. Most notably, though, he also stayed in character for the duration of production. Did this make him miserable to work with? Well, his co-star Catherine Moriarty says that it was scary to see him that way, but that she had complete trust in him and never felt unsafe. So had De Niro taken the method to the next level? Not according to instructor Strasberg, who railed against his approach. He said, "Our technique is designed to be engaged and then stopped. You don't continue the reality." He added, "There is a fascination with staying in character. It is an anxious act, used by actors who don't have the confidence to go in and out of character." He contends that if you are committed, you can pick it back up.
If we were to draw a graph of my process, of my method, something like this. Sir Ian, action. Wizard, you shall not pass! Cut! Sir Ian. Okay?
Say what you will about Marlon Brando, but by all accounts, he was able to turn off his role at night and enjoy a bowl of pasta. And De Niro's extreme interpretation, or bastardization, of method acting would define the term going forward. Today, when you think of going method, you might think of Daniel Day-Lewis, refusing to move his body while shooting My Left Foot, forcing the crew to push him around in a wheelchair in search of greater authenticity. While in production on Gangs of New York, Day-Lewis wore only period-appropriate attire on and off set, and subsequently caught pneumonia. This made for great publicity, but it also contributed to the actor's status as a legend, someone who would sacrifice anything in his quest to give an authentic performance. It's also rumored that he had a huge dispute with Paul Thomas Anderson while filming There Will Be Blood, because Day-Lewis wanted to, quote, kill Paul Dano for realsies. All of which brings us back to Leto. Now, Leto has been going method since his early days playing a heroin addict in Requiem. For that, he lost 26 pounds, lived on the street, and stopped having sex so he would share the constant cravings of his character, which I think implies he was as addicted to sex as a heroin user is addicted to heroin, which is dark. The resulting performance was widely acclaimed. For Dallas Buyers Club, he dropped 30 pounds and stayed in character for the duration of the shoot, resulting in a performance that landed him an Oscar. But popular opinion on the actor started to turn, and we'd be remiss if we didn't point out that at least some of the Leto backlash stems from credible allegations of sexual assault made against the actor, which in and of itself is reason to really not like the guy. But opinions about his acting abilities have also been on the decline lately, probably due to his widely publicized antics on the set of Suicide Squad. During production, Leto allegedly treated his co-stars abominably, sending them bizarre gifts such as a used condom, a live rat, bullets, and anal beads. After saying so himself in a red carpet interview, Leto has since denied these gifts. But this isn't the first time a movie star has been guilty of disruptive on-set behavior, though sometimes such behavior is rather delightful. George Clooney is known for pulling deliciously devious pranks, and everybody on set has fun. However, what made Leto's antics so unique was his justification for them. He was trying to go full method, and guess what? It totally worked.
I am not someone who is loved. I'm an idea.
Yeah, so in this case, Leto's commitment to the method doesn't seem to have helped him craft a deeper or more nuanced character. You don't get the sense that he's carefully drawing on emotional memories, whether his own or those he's imagined for his character. His antics mostly just seem to have pissed off his coworkers.
He had a henchman who would come into the rehearsal room, and the henchman came in with a dead pig and plopped it on the table. And then he walked out. And that was our introduction into Jared Leto.
In response to criticism of his behavior, he said, "I'm an artist at the end of the day. If I do something risky and you don't like it, basically, you can kiss my ass." The old "I'm an artist so there aren't consequences to my behavior" excuse. Fantastic. And very original. And we think this response reveals a lot about what method acting has become. In its early days, it was about introspection, connecting more deeply to yourself, and thus to your character. But these days, it's been popularized in the form of loud, outlandish stunts, none more important than doing crazy shit to your body. By these standards, it seems like Steve-O and Johnny Knoxville are the method actors of our time. Indeed, in recent years, the term method has become a catch-all to articulate the courageous ends actors will go to. Because these days, it's not enough to just stay in character for the whole production. See, we are a rather superficial species, so we often focus more on actors' external transformations rather than any internal emotional work they're doing. This has been exemplified in recent years by Oscar-baiting performances like Natalie Portman in Black Swan, or Joaquin Phoenix in Joker, or Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight. What is it with dudes who play Joker? This process is what scholar Kevin Esch calls actorly transformation, which entails two things. 1, transforming your body for a role, and 2, doing so exclusively for greater fidelity of performance, rather than to look a certain way. Indeed, these bodily transformations are often in service of constructing a character that is ugly or revolting. These performances garnered the most acclaim, presumably because we see these actors as brave for sacrificing their most prized possession, their superhuman hotness. Esch argues that this perception leads us to overvalue such performances simply for their physical fidelity. Did we mention that people can be a little superficial sometimes? But it's not just about looks. Modern method is also rife with outrageous antics, exemplified by folks like Leto, or say Leo, who at least to his credit typically goes method for movies that are actually good. Take DiCaprio slicing his hand open during Django Unchained. That's right, he bled real blood, supposedly cementing his complete immersion in the role. But Leo hit the peak of actually self-flagellation in The Revenant. This man deliberately chose to submerge himself in freezing waters and eat raw bison liver in order to win his first Oscar, and his win sent a simple message. A real actor destroys themselves for their art, which is why I drink a tiny teaspoon of poison before shooting every Wisecrack video. Arguably, The Revenant is far from DiCaprio's best performance, but it certainly was the most publicity generating. This furthers our suspicion that publicity, rather than elevation of acting as a craft, has become the point of this distorted version of method acting. And hardcore method actors don't only risk harming their own bodies. Even Brando infamously took method acting too far while filming Last Tango in Paris. Though it was made before the job intimacy coordinator existed, surprising your co-star with unplanned sexual contact is tantamount to assault. And Brando's not the only actor who's harmed a co-star in the name of method acting. Take Dustin Hoffman slapping Meryl Streep in Kramer vs. Kramer, or Jamie Dornan preparing to play a serial killer by actually stalking random women who definitely were not thanked in the credits. Sheesh, dude! As a result of the emphasis on physical transformation and outrageous stunts, critics and audiences have become more primed to appreciate the torment and extremes the actor went through, as opposed to the quality of the performance itself. This type of appreciation demands a dual perspective from viewers, one that requires them to be simultaneously invested in the fantasy of the film while also being hyper-aware that they're watching an actor at work. And the most outrageous thing about this, besides the hassle of sourcing bison liver, is that it goes against everything that method acting was meant to be in the first place. Method was about transcendence, about losing sight of the difference between the actor and the character. When it becomes fuel for media frenzy, all we do is hyper-focus on the actor doing the role. Leo didn't disappear into his character in The Revenant. If anything, the character disappeared into his awesome star power. The only role-playing going on was that of Leo as strong man who suffers for art. So what makes Leo's work revelatory and Leto's work a punchline? Well, perhaps it's because Leto's forcing that type of intensity upon others, and doing so for low-stakes blockbusters rather than prestige films. While Daniel Day-Lewis probably smelled awful on the set of The Crucible, he still had to bear the brunt of his acting choices. And when Leo cut his hand, he dealt with the scar, not his co-workers. However, in an era where we're learning to interrogate the filmmaking practices of those in power, Jared Leto variously inconveniencing or straight up terrorizing others in the name of acting seems pretty unappealing.
Margot opened the box and there was a live rat in the box.
For example, on the set of Morbius, they had to ask Leto to stop using crutches to use the bathroom and use a wheelchair instead, as his commitment to method urination was putting them behind schedule. Despite its glamorization, acting is still, at the end of the day, a job. And like any job, there should be a baseline of acceptable behavior and acceptable sacrifice. If being a dick to her administrative assistant was part of your accountant's process, you'd probably switch to TurboTax. But when an actor behaves like a dick to get into character, it's often seen as proof of their dedication to their craft. What's more, we don't expect most professionals to endure ongoing physical pain or emotional torment just to be good at their jobs. But because the suffering artist trope is so prominent, we valorize great art being created out of pain as a type of spiritual, mystical endeavor. And method has become the easiest way to measure that pain. So is method acting dead, and did Jared Leto kill it by being an asshole? Or has method just become a blanket excuse to be an asshole? Fellow method dabbler Robert Pattinson suspects as such, explaining that you only ever see people do the method when they're playing an asshole. You never see someone being lovely to everyone while they're really deep in character. And while that may be functionally true, we'd argue that the method as originally conceived is alive and well, if perhaps not given the bulk of critical attention. For example, Rosamund Pike, who famously portrayed Amy in Gone Girl, subscribes to method acting, but not the full immersion of some of its more extreme adherents. She says, during the making of a film, there are two people living side by side. There is you and there is the character. As you become more and more familiar in that character's headspace and shoes, you become more deft at being able to switch in and out. But at the beginning, you always need a way in. To get into Amy's head, she made a special music playlist. For another role, she would shadowbox in between takes. While playing Amy, she tried to channel the character's narcissism, constantly asking herself, what effect am I having on this person? Are they liking me? Are they impressed by me? Watching her in Gone Girl, you can sense her doing what, as Stanislavski instructed actors to do, turning remembered feelings into poetry. Interestingly enough, the ongoing conflict between youthful dedication to method's more extreme antics compared to the quiet focus of experienced acting is best embodied today in the discourse about Succession actors Brian Cox and Jeremy Strong. Strong's approach to acting was profiled in a viral New Yorker piece, and though he identifies as immersive rather than method, he seems to employ a lot of the same techniques. For example, he distances himself from his co-stars to mimic his character's strained relations, and requested to get actually tear-gassed in a scene just for the authenticity. Cox, a classically trained Scottish actor, finds this approach concerning. Calling method acting an American disease, he personally ascribes to a turn-it-on, turn-it-off style of acting that frankly sounds a lot less miserable. So, is it time to abandon method acting? Maybe for the Jared Letos of the world. On a small scale, Leto is no different than anyone who thinks their job is important enough to justify making their co-workers' lives miserable. His problem is less that he's taking method too far, and more that he's just being a jerk. And all the attention he gets for doing so undermines the actors who can use method to carefully craft psychologically rich performances. Overall, it seems to us that a technique invented to facilitate more authentic performances is now overwhelmingly drawing attention to the actor as a performer, rather than as a character. Of course, method acting can still be used to add quiet truth to a skilled actor's work.
Our spirits live on in the whole of time, exist in many vessels, through time.
That just doesn't make for the spiciest Entertainment Weekly headline. But we'd like to give the last word to Sir Laurence Olivier, who, after learning that his co-star in Marathon Man, Dustin Hoffman, had gone 3 days without sleeping to get into character, allegedly asked, My dear boy, why don't you just try acting? But what do you guys think? Does modern method acting need to smoke and or touch some grass? Is Jared Leto spoiling method acting for everyone else? Or is fully submerging yourself in your character still the best way to achieve an authentic on-screen performance? Let us know in the comments. Big thanks to our patrons for all your support, and be sure to check out the new perks on our jazzed up Patreon page. Gnaw on that subscribe button like it's some delicious bison liver, and don't forget to ring that bell. And as always, thanks for watching. Later!